Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brandon Davis. I'm the founder of the Rags to Riches community. I am highly unqualified to give you any advice about anything. I barely graduated high school. Do not like or comment on any of my videos, and please do not subscribe. Let's get to it.
Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Brandon. I am with the Rags to Riches community. In fact, I am the CEO and the Supreme Ayatollah. I have here today a pretty cool guest, pretty freaking cool guest. Maddie, what's going on, man? How's life?
Hey, it's great to be here. Thanks for having me on your channel.
I can't believe you agreed to it, man. All these bad things people say about me everywhere, man. You came on the show. That's awesome.
Well, I've been watching. You've had some great interviews lately, so
yeah,
good work.
Yeah. I found that I really enjoy talking to people. I didn't realize how much I did, so we're just gonna keep that going, man. And I appreciate you, like I said, agreeing to this, and I just kind of want to learn about you today. I want to figure out who you are and learn about you, and I might just I'll start off this way. Tell me about who you were prior to getting in crypto. What were you all about, man? Take me back a little bit.
So let's see, how far back should we go? So I was trained in neuroscience and psychology.
Okay.
And so my thing was always, I couldn't decide whether I wanted to be a researcher or a therapist.
Okay.
And actually help real people directly versus collecting data, analyzing it, and being involved in that side of things. And so economics was always a hobby for me. I took a course in college that was really motivating and exciting. I think I had a really good teacher for that. And so I learned about the scarcity of gold in my economics class and supply and demand.
Yeah.
All that good kind of stuff. And so that was kind of my background before crypto.
Okay, so let's take it back a little bit further. What made you interested in neuroscience, and what made you, like, from a childhood perspective, was that something always that was on your mind, like that type of thing, or where did that come from?
Yeah, so I think I always knew that I wanted to work with people. I always wanted to be involved with the mystery of the mind. And that's what psychology is the study of all things mental. So yeah. I knew that I would have to do research in order to pursue a clinical career and have that as part of my background. But a lot of people, they would switch it up later on and be all clinical. That's how most practitioners are. And so for me, I got a taste of a lot of things when I was getting research experience in undergrad. I worked in a neuroscience laboratory, and we studied how to help people quit smoking and studied their brain waves and paid them money to quit smoking tobacco cigarettes.
How did that go?
So this is, I think, fascinating.
Yeah.
People have a better success rate at quitting if they're paid $1,000 on top of whatever method they're using. So people can use a patch or a pill, or they can get counseling, or a combination of all those. Learning how to get, to avoid their triggers and that sort of thing. But yeah, if you pay people $1,000 on top of all that, then the results are even better. And
is that because they feel more accountable to the program? They feel like people are paying them. So, like, what was the conclusion?
Yeah. So people like bonuses. People like getting paid to do things. That's the premise of working, right?
Yeah.
And so money is useful. But in terms of actually quitting a substance, it turns out that paying people to quit is way more effective than talking to people about quitting. So in all of psychology, the strongest effect size it comes from contingency management as an intervention, which is paying people to quit hardcore drugs, paying people to, get off the couch and move, that sort of thing, actually has a stronger effect size than counseling does. And so in the case of people quitting smoking, they were getting $500 to get their brainwaves measured and to, decide which experimental group they were in, to see if they would get a placebo patch or a real patch. But then they would get a $500 bonus for remaining smoke-free during the days that they committed to. And so it was interesting, especially because if you think about it, well, not everybody knows. Most people who smoke want to quit smoking.
Sure.
But they don't know how, or they've tried and it didn't work out. And kind of the thing that, so a lot of people want to quit, but it's interesting to me that people will pay thousands of dollars a year as a part of their habit to buy tobacco cigarettes, but then it's only $1,000 or $500 that could help them quit. But it would have to come from somebody else, not from themselves.
Right.
Because people's mental accounting doesn't really keep a total, like, oh, just because I saved $500 on cigarettes or $1,000 doesn't mean it's going to motivate me to quit. So the way that we arrange incentives changes people's behavior. And so that's going to be pretty key in maybe some other questions that you're
my mind just blossomed into 1,000 different directions, and I can see that coming up, I think. Let me ask you this, like what makes you feel inspired, and what makes you feel like your best self?
That's a great question. One thing that I learned when I was working as a community mental health therapist for 7 years, it took me like 2 or 3 years before I realized I could practice what I preach. And I would say that definitely makes me feel like my best self is when I'm practicing what I preach. So when I used to do group therapy and I would tell people, for example, about taking vitamins, making your nutrition right, and how, your physical health is your mental health in some ways. And so when I started taking omega-369, which is that's just fish oil, it like changed my life. Something in my brain clicked, and I could understand it from a neuroscience perspective, how the fish oil is insulating the electrical wires in my brain. 25% of the weight of your brain is supposed to be electrical wires, like the insulation for them. And, but a lot of people, even in America, a lot of people are low on omega-3. And so it's no wonder that people have so much difficulty changing their behavior these days and like acting right and feeling like they're getting ahead in life if our brains aren't being, if the electrical wires in our brains aren't being insulated. And so, I got a chance to like teach that to a lot of people. I did it myself. I had my aha moment, and now I feel like it's easier for me to be my best self because I practice what I preach. I, extracted a lesson from that experience. And now if I recommend exercising, I exercise.
Yeah.
If I recommend things to increase your financial health, then I practice that myself.
So do you think that a lot of the problems that we see across Western culture, do you think that those are a large part of them, maybe nutritional deficiencies or issues? Is that kind of what I might be hearing?
So way more than gets credit for. Like I think for me, it was shocking to see how many people's lives changed from taking something that's $5 a month from your local grocery store. Like, I'm not here to shill you Maddie's brand of omega-3, maybe next year or something. But at the end of the day, I got to see people, because I was working with very low income individuals. People making less than $15,000 a year are the ones who qualified for the community mental health clinic that I worked at. And really, I got to see two people 2 or 3 people actually went from being homeless to getting straight A's in college their first semester. And at least one of those people didn't make the change for a long time. So I saw this client in the mental health clinic for like 6 months before they started taking omega-3. The other 2 did it immediately. And so I got to see these people's lives change, and hundreds of other people as well. And so that's one reason why it's so exciting to me, is because that's one way to improve our society, I think, is to make simple life hacks like that known to people, but then to extrapolate from that experience and to give people more hope in humanity, because you can increase somebody's IQ 10 IQ points by giving them omega-3 if they're deficient in it. And it's like, it's like 50% of the population or something that needs it.
So IQ is IQ crystal, or is you can have slight variations up or down?
I took a whole class on this in grad school, a seminar on like, if we're defining something as a personality trait, that means it's stable. So how can we really change it?
Right.
I mean, the simple answer is that I guess people throw around the term IQ, but what we really mean is how smart somebody's being in their current environment. And another thing that I learned from working with people directly for so many years, helping them change their behavior, was that I think people really are a product of their environment. And so we don't give enough credit to the fact that like how smart you are is based on, maybe people say the 5 closest people or something, but it's everybody in your social environment decides whether you do impulsive, like to some extent by creating your environment, gives you the right support or the right, they can impact your behavior in positive and negative ways. So
sure. So like, it's almost like a true test of IQ would be, we would be able to randomize an environment and put somebody in each one and see how they perform. That might be a better test.
That would be a more pure way to test it. But the way to actually like improve the smart behaviors that people are actually able to enact, like it takes more of changing the environment. And I think that's one way that crypto can be used to program mental health into money, is by making money healthier, not blaming it on people for being bad savers, especially when inflation is robbing you of, half your money every 12 years.
It's horrible.
So it just comes down to like, it's cool to say, fix the money, fix the world. But then we start actually looking at examples. And again, going back to the quitting smoking example, people really need the right environment to be successful at a major behavior change like that. Your IQ does not determine whether you're a smoker or not. It's determined by how many nicotine receptors you have in your brain, like how many people smoked around you whenever you wanted to try it, and whether you got sick when you puffed your first cigarette, or whether, like made you more socially agile or helped your depression or anxiety or, all these different things, that smoking helps with. Yeah. If it wasn't damaging your lung tissue.
So you've worked with a lot of different people.
Yes.
What are 1 or 2 instances of how your counseling really helped somebody in such a way that surprised you? You mentioned one earlier, but do you have any other examples?
So I think how it surprised me, like that the results were really great.
Yes.
I always tried to take the hardest cases because I was overqualified. I was getting paid not a lot of money, and putting in all my effort, even though I have a lot more training than would be required for the position. But I got compensated in other ways, like really being able to make a huge difference in people's lives that wouldn't necessarily have gotten the help. The first example I would say is there were a lot of individuals that I work with that were able to quit abusing substances. And, so my position was as a drug counselor to help people to be able to reach total abstinence from all substances of abuse. When you actually look at how most drug clinics work, they only care about the substance you came in for. So if you quit heroin, but you develop a cocaine addiction, then they still think that they're successful in some way. But the root of the addiction is not based on the substance always. It's based on more general systems in your reward centers, your ability to delay gratification. People will use whatever. And I mean, so for example, even when somebody quits, let's say alcohol, and they start using a lot of caffeine, they start pounding energy drinks all the time, then I wouldn't consider that a total abstinence, because they're using way more caffeine than they used to, because caffeine can give you a heart attack in a few years if you're doing too many grams of it per day. And so so by sticking with somebody and actually seeing what problem solving it would take, what environmental changes would they need, new people, places, and things were usually in the mix. So helping people to quit smoking or ultimately to quit much harder drugs that are even more harmful in the short term, meth and heroin were big ones. And so that was one way that people really surprised me and taught me a lot. And another way was actually when it came to healthy relationships. So I taught a group counseling class for 2 hours every week on healthy relationships. And I was able to integrate information from lots of different disciplines. And that's another area where it really surprised me and got me excited by seeing how people are approaching the loneliness factor in their life, how people are approaching the relationship with themselves. So one of the takeaways that I had from teaching that group that I would tell people, a nice soundbite, is if you want to have healthier relationships with other people, the first step is to have a healthier relationship with yourself. And that occurs through two starting points. One is walking the walk, and the other is talking the talk. And so when you walk the walk, you're practicing self-care. And when you talk the talk, you're practicing self-esteem. Both of those skills are pretty good on their own, but when you actually combine them and you say, I'm eating this healthy meal for lunch today because I'm worth it, then you can start to change kind of some deep held beliefs that you may or may not be aware of, that my brain thinks that for some reason, I'm a bad person because I've been eating too much junk food. Well, the way to change that isn't to just tell yourself you're a good person, and it's not to just stop eating junk food, although those are great on their own. When you get the combined effect, it's much more powerful.
Interesting. So I've always wondered this too, in your line of work, if you have things that you have to get off your chest, who do you go to?
So I was trained in a very interpersonal style of therapy. And that even comes down from dynamic approaches, psychodynamic, all the way back to Freud. And it's not super popular, but I am of the belief that it's okay for therapists to have their own therapists.
Yeah, I was curious. I've always been curious about that.
And this is just one part of many ways that we can take care of ourselves as people in the helping profession. And that's another bit of advice that goes a long way, is that if you're caring for somebody else, whether it's somebody who's elderly or somebody who's infantile, no matter the age, it matters a lot that you take care of yourself first, so that you don't get run down with emotional burnout, and then you aren't even helping that person very much. So self-care is important. So for me, yeah, at different points in my life, I've been the client and had my own therapist, and that gave me perspective on how to be a better therapist. But I've also really been able to use exercise, eating healthy, limiting, substances and all that kind of stuff, to really, to be my best self and to go back, practice what I preach.
Yeah. I would say a couple years back, I went down this rabbit hole of C.G. Jung, who's a Swiss psychiatrist, psychoanalyst, psychologist from the early 1900s. And one of the things that he said in one of his books, and I tend to agree, is that, well, actually, I want to ask you, when you're studying about the human mind, and you're studying and learning about techniques to help people and understanding how everything kind of works up here, did you ever uncover things about yourself that you didn't expect that you would uncover based on your training?
Yeah. So part of being a professional is like not just bringing your own problems into a space where you're trying to figure it out for everybody else too.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I mean, there is definitely overlap between like my existence as a human and like the existent, the mechanisms that I was trying to work out that occur in the brain. So for example, I did my master's thesis. It was very unusual because I did a multi-year study on the brainwaves of individuals with ADHD who are smokers and non-smokers, and the effects of them quitting on impulsivity and attention. And so when I can look at these like 3D representations of the electrical activity that comes out of somebody's brain, I can see millisecond by millisecond which parts of the brain are lighting up. That gives me a little bit better understanding of my own reality, but also when we design experiments, let's say, that put somebody in a situation where they have to pay attention for a super long time, and it's a really difficult task, or if it's a really boring task, that actually taught me something too, and that's just a behavioral study actually, but it taught me that, well, I would say one takeaway is that, when you're maybe on some task or on some journey, and then you're almost there, it's like you get an extra boost of energy and motivation. That hasn't necessarily been studied very well, and if it has, it gets mixed in with other results. So if you want to like measure if nicotine is helping somebody, or quitting smoking is hurting them or making them better, then you can measure their performance on an attention-based task. But then like the practice effect gets in the way. And then like you have to actually put somebody in a real enough situation where it's like, a third shift worker isn't going to get fatigued like doing a 5-minute task in a laboratory. Like if you put them in for 2 hours and you pay them lots of money, so they have to pay lots of attention, then you can start to even see the effect of what you're trying to measure. And so in that situation, there's a crossover where it's like scientists are really bad at like explaining things to the general public, at like designing experiments, at like having the right incentive structure.
They're really good at fixing broken bones. They're really good at that.
It's true. And so it's kind of it's a mess, but at the same time, just caring about methodology, just caring about how translational something is, like it puts you so far ahead. And then that's another overlap between my professional, history and my crypto career now, is that I appreciate being on the cutting edge of things. I appreciate like getting to work with the coolest technology, like being able to work with brainwave technology, and be able to write my own code for how to analyze it and come up with new methods of how to present the experiment in the first place. So that really translates to what I'm doing now, which is, communicating to people on YouTube, understanding game theory to a deep level.
So apart from HEX, if you could have a billboard in a city that had the highest amount of traffic imaginable, and everybody would drive by this billboard, what would you put on that billboard? Not crypto related.
Take omega 369.
So we're going to put a link in the description for some Amazon omega 369s. Is that right?
Awesome. Oh, that'd be great.
Sweet, man. So let's ask this. Okay. So you've got all this information, you got all this knowledge, professional training, etc. All right. And you get into crypto. Talk to me pre-HEX crypto. What does that look like for you?
So I heard about Bitcoin here and there. I even read about the Ethereum DAO in The Economist magazine back in 2016.
Okay.
I would say 2015, somewhere in there. But I didn't take it seriously until the price of Bitcoin crossed the price of gold. So that's when gold was about 2,300, 2,500, and Bitcoin was for the first time approaching that and going over that. Also around the same time that they're finalizing what needs to happen for the fork, where it'd be a hard fork between Bitcoin Core and Bitcoin Cash. And so that's when I started paying attention to Bitcoin. I bought a little bit and then really got involved. It was a hobby that really got me excited. And so I started importing miners from China and importing I heard you guys talking about that the other day on your channel. I was reselling them on eBay, like just
everybody was.
I
wrote absurd amounts of money.
I wrote a little program or found an app that would monitor the Bitmain website because they started randomizing when they would release the next batch of S7s or whatever, or S9s. I can't remember. Anyway, so I would know, but it would be like the middle of the night, and then I would send my Bitcoin in there, and then hope I would get my miner a month or two later, and then just pick it up at the FedEx yard, and then just immediately ship it to somebody who had bought it.
Yeah. So my experience in mining was like, I wish I hadn't. I mean, I was thankful for the experience because it did teach me a whole lot of technical things that I wouldn't have learned otherwise. Just about SHA-256 and just all sorts of things. But so you kind of agreed with me when you said that you wouldn't have gone the mining route. You would have maybe invested your money instead.
So I actually never did mine other than testing out some cloud mining to know how that worked.
Yeah.
But it fascinated me. And I was also importing these physical Bitcoins. So it's like a partial of a Bitcoin that they used to be made by BTCC, Bitcoin China. So like Bobby Lee and all those original Bitcoiners had created their own mint where you would have, it was something that kind of looks like this. This is a cold storage coin, but it had a hologram on the back, a sticker you could peel off, and it had whatever Bitcoin they had put in there on poker chips, basically.
Yeah.
And then there was also a group in Japan that was making Satori coins. And so I was following international law very closely. But I got turned off by PayPal because for some reason they thought that me selling 0.001 of a Bitcoin, in the form of a paper wallet, essentially, that was in a collectible coin that was worth much more than 0.001, that lumped me into the people who were selling a whole Bitcoin on eBay for a discount because they were up to no good. And so I've even gotten a little taste of financial censorship, which is eye-opening. It really tells me where the line is.
How did it make you feel?
To be honest, I knew that it was, I knew that it could be coming because I was so abreast of the laws and of the competition and of when I searched for these coins, then what was coming up was, contracts, mining contracts or selling actual Bitcoin and stuff like that. And so it was clear that I was just getting lumped into the wrong group. But so anyway, I had left 2 cents in my PayPal account. And if you're super old and you know what you're supposed to do when you go to a restaurant and you get really bad service, like they spit in all your food and you watch them do it. And then if you want to like really give an FU to the waitress, then you can leave just 2 pennies, a 2 cent tip. And so that's what I left the, that's what I left the government officials that were freezing my account. And cause they had, so there was this thing where I could get my PayPal account back if I signed an affidavit saying I would never do it again. And these are the PayPal, or this is the eBay people, the compliance team at eBay. So you could tell that they just broke some laws, and then the government came in and was like, hey, you have to start enforcing on these type of accounts so that you can stop money laundering. Because, the US fights their wars more with the dollar now than they do with soldiers. And they just, they restrict, they turn people on and off. And so I got turned off. But I thought it was funny. I still follow all laws very carefully. I still am allowed to use the rest of the banking sector, except for Cash App. They also, I sent Bitcoin to a mixer, which was legal back then. Now it might not be legal to use a mixer, but that's all I did. I was sending.
What's a mixer?
A mixer is where you can take a Bitcoin transaction or a crypto transaction and you can send it to a wallet that mixes it up with everybody else's coins. And then it sends you out something that can't be directly traced back to the origin address, which is my Cash App with my legal name, with my bank account. I believe privacy is a human right. I'm not, doing anything wrong. But before they enacted the law that said you're not supposed to use mixers, they were enforcing it on Cash App by turning people off who had sent to a mixer.
Have you seen the new IRS law that's requiring banks to now report deposits of $600 or more?
No, but I experienced it.
It's a really, really weird situation. It's a really weird time that we're living in because we have the juxtaposition of something as liberty ridden as crypto in certain cases, and then you have these weird tides of, I don't want to use a word that's too strong, but just flavors of maybe authoritarianism in terms of economics. And just a really, really weird time that we live in. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I like how you put that liberty ridden.
Yes.
Yeah. I think so. If we zoom all the way out, I think if we think about psychology and think about economics, at the end of the day, the humans are always trying to find better ways of doing things. And so all of this gridlock that we're experiencing in the world, it also serves a purpose. And certain actors, certain powers to be, they benefit from gridlock more than things running smoothly. So I'll give you an example. A university might have, a president or an administrator that is so high up the political ladder that they don't mind putting somebody who's really bad at their job in a certain position. And then that can limit, let's say, what happens in that department or what happens in that school. And, so they could switch funding from one university, branch to a different just by putting somebody bad in charge of enrollment. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of the bad side of gridlock, is that certain powers to be can profit where it's bad for society. But another example is that gridlock can be good. Gridlock is sometimes good, I guess, if you want people to hear both sides of an argument, or if you need things to slow down and be checked, right? To have power structure, to have checks and balances. Sometimes a little bit of gridlock is okay.
Do you think this gridlock is due to accumulations of systems and bureaucracy over time? Or do you think it's focused on a higher echelon of people that are intentionally making these decisions to suppress a majority of the people of the world?
I definitely think it's both.
Okay.
But I think the way that we change those people's behavior is by our next leap forward in technology should have better incentives programmed into the environment.
For everybody.
So program it into the money. And so, for example, with HEX, you're programming being a long-term thinker. You're programming delaying gratification. And that's a great trait for the biggest bags in the economy to have, to be programmed into the money. Now, we might find other ways to incentivize the right things, right? If we donate our HEX to a DAO, right, that keeps track or actually controls how the money can be used, or even just keeps score, right? That's what our current political system could be doing. It's let's vote this person out of office because we have a clear idea of what they're doing. And but it very much matters, in a system, the incentives, and then also the information, because money is a form of information anyway. And so we want our money and our information to be honest and healthy and transparent, but not ruin our privacy and not the worst thing I think that can happen in a thriving world is where all of the mad gains that are created through technology because everybody's cooperating enough. That's something that all the people cooperating should benefit from. You shouldn't take all the billions of dollars that comes out of, some great inventions or, Apple, Tesla, all these things. We know that billionaires are very poor capital allocators. They think they're geniuses and their environment tells them that. Right. But it's actually horribly inefficient and it slows down progress. That's another way that inflation robs from us, is because if you listen to what Jeff Booth says, he's the author of The Price of Tomorrow and a Bitcoin advocate, although we haven't talked to him about HEX yet. So he says that the price of everything should go down over time because technology makes things cheaper. And so there's this hidden cost that when we measure inflation, we're not measuring how technology is progressing and making things cheaper. And so you have an exponential curve down to make things cheaper with technology. And then you have money printing and governments having an exponential line up on the supply of money, making it less scarce. And that robs people of how money should be more valuable over time, not less valuable. And for not taking risk. But in the current monetary system, I love this. They gave a Nobel Prize to a couple psychology economics people who discovered that people are bad at saving for their retirement.
Discovered.
Everybody threw them the biggest party that ever existed in academia. And, everybody got to pat each other on the back because their solution was, well, let's just put centralized entities in charge of everybody's retirement money. Nothing could go wrong there. This is in behavioral economics. I mean, this founded the field that is studying this. And it tells you how early we are in science, not just crypto, but in science, and in how that translates to politics and organizing society and giving people the right incentives, making sure the billionaires have the right incentives to like take care of things moving forward and to not exploit people. But anyway, they give the Nobel Prize for this, for saying that people are bad at saving. And those economists were not taking into consideration the fact that the price of things goes up over time. So of course people aren't saving, is because the government's printing so much money that why would you buy something tomorrow that you could buy cheaper today?
Mm-hmm.
So the price of your savings goes down over time. It, even at 3 or 4% a year, you're looking at destroying your purchasing power over even part of your lifetime, such that like people get shocked by the price of their everyday goods and services because the price of things keeps going up. But so that really helps to illustrate some of these ideas of like, if we had a better system of accounting and of money and of tracking this information, then we would be able to see that the mad gains in technology are being robbed from us. And then we could do something about that because the world still is maybe somewhat free.
I like that. Now, this is something that I've pondered quite often. If we could snap our fingers and we had a decentralized way to provide, let's say, use the word provide wealth for everybody, is it a good thing to just go ahead and snap our fingers and have that provided for everybody, or should it take some sort of action on their part to start the process?
One thing that I've always believed is that people are adaptive by nature. And so all we would need to do is, I think, unlock this idea of paying yourself to change your own behavior.
Mm-hmm.
If we give people money, but we don't give them better skills and better environments to spend that money in, then the money's going to keep going where it's always gone. And it doesn't matter if we change the name of the money or if we like even reset everybody's bank account,
Mm-hmm.
but just like the organization of society today, like, people who have the right skills and the right people around them and the right environment, like, and who have been lucky enough to do that, who have been able to hold on to it for one reason or another, like, that's not evenly distributed across society. And guess what? Getting more money, it doesn't fix your problems.
Mm-hmm.
At least not all of them. And that's another thing that we try to look at on my channel on Hex Therapy Live is like, okay, so 2,000 people who watch the show have become millionaires in Hex in the past 2 years. Like, what do we do about that in terms of making the rest of our lives that rich?
My next question was, at what point did you get re-educated in crypto?
I would say, at what point did I get re-educated? So my original education was probably from Andreas Antonopoulos and Safety Namus. I took like 4 of Safety's courses, which were very academically rigorous, in fact. and I was in the first round of people that took his courses back when he accidentally emailed out everybody's email that was taking the class. So maybe I should hit those people up and tell them about HEX. Yeah, I mean, definitely when I came across Richard Hart, he was talking a lot about Bitcoin and was getting ready to release Bitcoin HEX. And there was a Bitcoin free claim, and I was learning about that at the time. And so that's what pulled me in, was the Bitcoin free claim and the technical challenge of that. And then, like, you know, Richard talks about a lot of things, and that definitely re-educated me about Bitcoin and what crypto really is. And then if I want to go even another step further, I would say recently I've been reading a Medium person called Concoda.
Okay.
And they like frequently call out how crypto is a scam. And I think I used to be a Bitcoin maxi. Now I'm a HEX and Richard Hart maxi. Like, and looking back, I mean, Bitcoin is super expensive to transact. It's super slow. The learning curve is huge. Now it's just being used as a store of value, but there are a lot of really good criticisms against it. And I think that there's so much groupthink that happens. It almost takes being re-educated probably multiple times in order to really be able to have a more independent, like more integrative view of everything.
What was the thing that Richard taught you that was, I guess, the most monumental in shifting your ideas and thoughts about the crypto space at large?
I think like the idea that Richard says that hits me the most intellectually is about how HEX monetizes the time value of money. And when we really explore what is money and what is crypto, you know, what is Bitcoin, it really starts to make a lot of sense that your best store of value is going to happen on chain. It's going to be provable and it's going to be immutable. And so like HEX is a better cryptocurrency and a better store of value than Bitcoin or the dollar on a long enough time scale, probably because when you time lock your money and then you can save yourself from yourself, you can commit to a savings plan and actually be incentivized to become a saver in a system that is much more healthy than the fiat system. That is what money is it's storing value over time. And there's no better way to store value over time than to commit to something on the blockchain and be rewarded to do so.
Cool. So what are your thoughts on Pulsechain with regards to, as a self-proclaimed HEX maxi and Richard Hart maxi, how will that affect HEX in your estimation?
Awesome question. I think so. The difference is that HEX is a finished product, and it was on day one. The first time you could buy HEX through like a daily auction, it was finished. It still has not been changed. And that's as far as the code goes. Like, that matters. Ethereum changes frequently. They even have silly names for like all the different major software changes they do. Bitcoin still has a team of developers that are keeping it running and stopping bugs and that sort of thing. HEX, it's not necessary to do that. So HEX is really the only finished product in crypto that has product market fit, that is a good form of money, a good store of value, and has the right game theory behind it, which we can talk about. But so in a lot of ways, HEX is a finished product. Everything else is a promise coin. Pulsechain is, somebody was asking me like, is Pulsechain a promise coin? And we can get super technical and we can say that people still haven't been able to buy it on the free market, but have been able to sacrifice for it. So that's doesn't make it a security. But it also doesn't mean that the code is complete. But in a lot of ways, the code is complete because it's just being copied over from Ethereum. What really matters about Pulsechain and how Pulsechain matters to HEX has to do with more the user's side of things than the code side of things. It matters more in the game theory, not just the code. And that's where a lot of people, I think, who've come before us in crypto, they haven't really understood it very well. And there's a reason why people don't understand crypto very well, is because it's such a powerful thing that once you touch it, you could get the wrong information and think that you're a genius when really you were just early and you chanced into something that got more users after you. But like when we really look at what is the game theory, what's the psychology of Bitcoin, is this idea that you can stop double spends from happening by paying people to be honest, paying like anybody on the internet who can prove how much electricity they're burning, they can keep the public Excel spreadsheet honest, right? So like basically paying people to burn electricity to prove that because they're getting paid in that token of Bitcoin, they don't want to crash the price, so they don't want to let a double spend happen. And it's really easy to prevent double spends. It's like it doesn't take billions of dollars of electricity to do that. Like, in fact, I used to run a Bitcoin node, and so my $1,000 computer could catch all the double spends, right? But in terms of trust, how you can trust that the spreadsheet is honest, the way that Bitcoin solved that problem, that made it the first. And Pulsechain is going to do a lot of things that are going to be the first, just like HEX did. But HEX is also an example of people getting the wrong information, because a lot of people didn't get into it and then they thought it was a scam because of certain marketing language that's being used, like organic marketing. And but that created a huge opportunity to create a new set of whales. And now all the whales and sharks and dolphins and squids and turtles are getting a chance to level up by getting into Pulse and getting into Pulsex before the rest of the world figures out how much of a leap forward it is. And that's actually really important to maintaining the value of Pulse, to changing the power structures in the world, to implement a healthier version of money. All of this, I believe that some of this is happening because Richard is a genius and he's surrounded by other geniuses. But I also probably think it's even bigger than that, that the universe is really bringing a lot of things together. And I'm not saying that it's all going to go just right. I mean, this, technology being on the cutting edge of things is, it's not a sure thing by any means. But when I look at Pulsechain, it's a copy of Ethereum, but it's giving everybody a copy and then giving them something to do with it. Currently people, they only have so many buttons they can press when they do crypto. They can buy and they can sell. And then that's really what a crypto being a store of value, that's what it is buying, holding for a certain amount of time and then selling and seeing if you get more or less economic energy out of that transaction or not. But but at the end of the day, it's then you can add on lending and stuff like that. You can add on paper versions of things. And but that's not really crypto. So, but what Pulsechain is going to do, which is way more crypto than almost anything, is allow you to provide liquidity and to yield farm.
Mm-hmm.
And giving everybody in the current system a free copy and then saying, guess what? Now you can do whatever you wanted to do on the decentralized world computer that was supposed to be Ethereum before the fees got too high a year and a half ago, and it got stopped in its tracks. But like, you can run all these cool games and apps and have it all be almost free, and stop double spends at a way more massive scale than currently is being done. Paying people to hold trustlessly is something that Pulse will do, that HEX has done, but that no one else has done.
Mm-hmm. What's your message to the inevitable influx of people, potentially younger people, or just all sorts of folks that are going to come onto Pulse Chain? What's your vision for them? Like, how can we help those folks, and how can we talk to them on their level?
I think they'll figure it out just through making errors and time. I think they'll figure out that HEX is the best store of value. I think that they'll figure out that holding is better than day trading.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of there will be a lot of pain that goes along with those lessons, but that's kind of how life is.
Yeah. So do we adopt like a tough love mentality towards these folks, or what are your thoughts on that?
Like, I think it's really cool, those who want to volunteer
mm-hmm.
their time and their economic energy to set good examples,
mm-hmm.
to be, so like, for example, and I think, to answer that, we want to spend our mad gains on things that pay it forward. We want to use our time when we're retired to give back a little bit to whatever speaks to us, and
mm-hmm.
whatever we can find a compromise, between the responsibilities that we take on, and like taking care of ourselves and not letting crypto be our entire life.
Mm-hmm.
So let me see. I thought I had a good example. Let's see. I may have lost my train of thought.
I hate when that happens. Well,
I knew where I was going with that.
Yeah.
For example, for me, I find it really meaningful to be an honest broadcaster with a new environment, so to speak. When a flower, doesn't bloom beautifully, right? Like, you don't always blame the flower, you blame the soil. You blame like, if you put a good flower in a bad place, then it's not going to bloom. I think like part of the reason why our information systems are off these days, and why like fear porn is all that's on TV,
mm-hmm.
and why people have to like escape so much into like things that sometimes can be bad for them, is because we have a trust issue in
mm-hmm.
our society with like the broadcasters, or like the people who control the information. So like, once I started to dive into what it means to be a broadcaster on YouTube, I realized that people in the HEX community and in the Pulse and Pulsex communities as well, like, we have an opportunity, if we reach our financial freedom, like, we have an opportunity to be better broadcasters than have come before us, especially in crypto, because the incentives are perverse. They make their money, by selling ads to leverage exchanges. And a lot of times the broadcaster doesn't even know what ads run on their channel. They just see a cool button that says turn on monetization once you've hit 1,000 followers. And it's like, hey, reaching 1,000 followers wasn't easy. For some people that took years. And some people in HEX have gotten 1,000 followers in days or weeks. But for a lot of people, whether they're coming in hot or whether they've put in a lot of work, you know, it's competitive to like keep people's attention. And so you want to be rewarded for that hard work. And so the monetization methods that exist right now, they are very harmful to communities and to broadcasters being able to give an honest message, because guess what? You know, the supercomputers that decide what ads go where, you know, they can tell what I'm talking about. You know, they know a lot more about my audience than I do in some ways. And so advertisers are able to come in, bad actors who are encouraging people leverage trading, taking loans to, you know, gamble and multiply the house advantage against themselves. Like that, the more they successfully infiltrate like crypto streams, the more like ads people see when they're trying to get into crypto, we might lose the message of what crypto is. Bitcoin has lost its way. Why is the Bitcoin conference sponsored by leveraged exchange platforms? That you failed at fixing the money and fixing the world when that's the case. And so for me, I am setting up HEX conferences. I hope a lot of other people do too. But I'm doing it in an honest way. And it's not easy, but it's possible because I have mad gains from HEX. I am in a better environment to where I don't have to lie. I don't have to sell my audience to leverage exchanges. I can live off these mad gains and try to not care what people think of me. Try to ignore the trolls and like, but really speak my piece. You know, a lot of advertisers, they end up getting sponsorships one way or another. Even if they have ads turned off, they might, you know, they might start to have perverse incentives and not even realize how they are being changed by the system that they were supposed to be fighting. So for example, all these crypto people that are getting super buddy with legacy finance, like we have to remember the reason why Bitcoin failed to fix the money and fix the world is not necessarily because of it as a technology or the people that went into it saying that they could make a difference. It's like the fact that you couldn't do a decentralized exchange of Bitcoin. You had to go through a centralized exchange, which meant somebody could kick down somebody's doors and force KYC to happen, force know your customer, force attach a serial number from a bank account onto your crypto, and then track everything you do in crypto. And that's actually a worse system than we started with probably. And and so yeah, it's really cool to see around the same time HEX was invented, so was Uniswap. And Uniswap introduced the biggest leap forward since Bitcoin, which was that you could trade through these decentralized liquidity pools, and anybody can create them, and it's all through smart contracts. And once you get money into the system of Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever your fiat on-ramp is, then you never have to, well, I shouldn't say you never have to go back to the old system, but at least you can trade different coins. You can buy into HEX or you can buy into whatever you believe in without being tracked and controlled by a centralized exchange. And so all these Bitcoin billionaires who ended up founding their own exchanges, they were trying to do the right thing, but they always had a door that somebody could kick down. They always were keeping everybody's keys, which is not what crypto was invented for. So it's no wonder that it went wrong, because the digital money space was touching the legacy financial space without enough decentralized distance between the two. Now that Uniswap exists, it's possible. Now that HEX exists, I mean, how many Bitcoin guys were billionaires and could influence the design of something and could, you know, there's no evidence that Satoshi was a billionaire before Bitcoin. There's no evidence. We know Vitalik wasn't rich before Ethereum, you know, like $100 million, $1 billion rich. Richard is the first person to come along who was already a billionaire from Bitcoin and Ethereum. Well, sorry, just from Bitcoin. And then he created HEX. He worked on it for 2 years. He delayed the launch, even though it was being developed during a bubble. And he waited until the exact day that Bitcoin was at its lowest point. And that's when he launched HEX. And told everybody to buy Bitcoin at the very bottom. I bought some at like 3,500 or something. Mm-hmm. And, then we got to do this huge swing up. Then the market went down. HEX went up more. Now HEX keeps going up. So it's really cool that we're creating a new environment, and you can actually see through my examples and through the history of HEX, like why HEX could be different. Although I think when we go back to your question about like, well, how is Pulse different, and like, how do we protect people and that sort of thing? Like, one way we protect people is by being honest, like saying things publicly that are recorded, and then like people can go back and check the receipts.
I like that.
Not being afraid that like something might be unpopular, because your audience, like, do you create your audience or does your audience create you? I think through my experience on YouTube, a lot of people would end up with an audience that influences them because they keep doing something until it works. And a lot of times what works is just appealing to a broader group of people instead of sticking to your core or instead of sticking to your own message. And so in order to be popular and to get more followers, and like this whole point system that it takes to even be a broadcaster is designed to favor the legacy system, to serve your audience up for you, to change who you are as a broadcaster into somebody who is doing 10-minute videos because that's what hits on YouTube, instead of taking your time to get an organic message through. We can protect people by entertaining and educating them. We can protect people by setting a good example ourselves, and by, I would say, practicing what we preach, like taking care of ourselves, is all good stuff.
That was one hell of an answer, dude. Thank you. That was very well thought out. Appreciate that. I like to try to keep things as close to as an hour as we can, and I think we're right upon that. So I want to give you the opportunity to kind of talk about what you do, talk about where you are, what times you're broadcasting, and just kind of give my audience an idea of that. They probably all know you already, but some may not.
So I do 2 shows a week that are live, and they're at the same time of day, 7:30 Central, 5:30 Pacific, 8:30 Eastern time. On Tuesday nights is Quant Gang, and that stands for quantitative analysis. And we try to understand as deep down the rabbit hole as we can possibly go with HEX. And then on Thursdays, I do HEX Therapy Live, which is usually a monologue from me or interacting with the chat to talk about how to program mental health into money, how to deal with sudden wealth syndrome, how to understand ourselves better so that we can be the best version of ourselves possible. So it mixes in mental health and crypto and HEX. So those are my regular streams. I also just finished hosting the 2nd annual hexconference.com, and we had 26 hours of content created over 4 days. We're going to do that again in person in Las Vegas on March 6th through 9th. And there are only a few tickets left. It's going to be the biggest in-person gathering of Hexicans in history. And I'm really excited for that as well. That you can learn more at hexconference.com, go to hexticket.com or hexpo.vegas. And so I'm Matty Allen, MATI, all in on everything, Twitter, YouTube. So people can check me out at allmylinks.com/allin.
Outstanding. Well, man, thank you again for chatting today. I wanted to get to know you a little bit better.
My pleasure.
And hopefully we ask some questions to kind of get a little bit better insight in who you are, what you're all about. So I really appreciate it. And you and I will be talking soon, man. Thank you so much for coming on.
That sounds great. Thanks for everything you do.